Well, concrete itself is naturally porous material. It's open, it has capillaries that solutions and contaminants can soak into. So we do need to block those pores. We do need to put a barrier or some kind of repelling chemical to stop that oil getting into the concrete. Two ways to do it are with a what we call a film forming sealer, something that will put a barrier across the surface that sits on the surface and stops the oil getting into the concrete. The other way to do it is to use a penetrating sealer, one that is resistant to oil, not just a water repellent sealer, something like our PEN 55 or our Premium, that will soak into the concrete and repel the oil from getting down into the concrete surface. The product we have as a film former is called the U140, and I like to say that that provides an absolute barrier to stop oil getting into the concrete, because it puts a film, it soaks into the concrete, into the subsurface, and then leaves this thin film on the top that is very oil resistant, very fuel resistant, and provides an absolute barrier. The penetrating sealers, the surface is still open, so technically the oil can get into that top surface compared to a product like the U140. So that would be the best way to stop oil getting into concrete. So our CoverShield U140 is a highly resistant, oil and stain resistant polyurethane sealer. It's water-based, it's a thin coat that goes on concrete and is really resistant to oil and to acid and chemical stains. We use it mainly for interior applications, trowel finish concrete, smooth concrete, something like a garage floor or a workshop or a factory. That's where it has a lot of industrial applications, but we also now use it for consumer type situations, residential garage floors, even outside on a driveway. It provides excellent resistance to oil, to diesel, hydraulic fluids, any type of kind of petroleum-based chemicals, oil solutions that might get into the concrete. It's also used on decorative concrete. It's a great sealer if you stain the concrete and now you want to put a highly oil-resistant sealer on the surface there and protect the color, to protect that stained or stamped concrete. That's another good use for the U140. Diesel, hydraulic, motor oils, cutting oils, that's another significant application in factories where you have cutting fluids, lubricating oils. Any of those types of chemicals that you want to stop getting into the slab is a great application for the U140. A key factor is you don't have to do significant surface prep in order to use this product. As long as the floor is clean, as long as it's absorbent, in other words, water will soak into it, you can use the U140. It doesn't need extensive grinding and expensive surface prep that you might have with an epoxy coating, for example. Epoxy coatings do provide oil and chemical resistance, but the surface has to be significantly ground in order for that epoxy to stick to the floor. And then you have to put it on in a pretty thick layer in order to get the maximum protection. With the U140, you get extreme protection, but with a very thin coat. And because it's very thin, it doesn't lift and peel like an epoxy would do. So in terms of easier surface prep, higher coverage, and ease of application, you get much more bang for your buck with a U140 sealer. So our CoverShield U140 was developed initially for commercial and industrial applications. We have a long track record for using this product in those applications. because of its heavy duty, oil and stain resistant. But a key factor of that U140 is it doesn't need extensive surface prep. You don't have to grind the floor, aggressively grind the floor. As long as the concrete will accept water, as long as the U140 can soak in, that is sufficient prep to use the product. So that now allows us to make it available to consumer and DIY type applications. So your garage floor, your workshop, your hobby shop are now also great applications for the U140 interior. And then exterior, if you have a driveway or stamped concrete or stained concrete or an overlay, and you're looking to provide some maximum resistance with minimum prep, then that is an excellent application for the U140, and that product is now available to you. Typical applications for the U140, first of all on the new construction side. That's a big area where we use that product, where we placed fresh concrete in a factory, in a workshop, your garage floor, your auto shop, and you want to protect that concrete from oil stains, from chemical contamination. Yeah, you've got a brand new floor and you're going to be introducing these chemicals. The last thing you want to do is to be staining that brand new floor with oil, hydraulic fluid. So that is a major application for the U140. This is a product that will soak into the concrete, put a barrier, what I call an absolute barrier, on the floor, and will keep those chemicals from soaking into the concrete and give you a chance to come and clean that up. It doesn't lift and peel like an epoxy would do. It's very thin coating and provides a very cost-effective but a highly resistant solution for you. The other situation is on an existing floor where you've got oil contamination, maybe you've got slip and fall issues, and you want to be able to protect that floor. Obviously you've got to clean it first and then protect it again from further contamination. There could be EPA issues, things like that, where you're required by law, by local law, or by federal law in order to keep that floor in a much more pristine and easily cleaned and maintained situation. So again, U140 provides that. It'll put once the floor is cleaned, it will put this thin but very tough seal across the floor that won't lift and peel. It will hold up to forklift traffic and also hold up to all these contaminants that you may spill or drop onto the floor. So one area of application for the U140 is on floors where it's important to keep them clean, OSHA regulations, contamination, maybe EPA regulations, clean rooms, safety areas, where you want to keep the contaminants from soaking into the concrete, onto the floor, or on the workshop floor, factory floor, and the U140 will keep those products on the surface and allow, first of all, you to see the contaminants and also be able to clean them up. So that is a big driver, if you like, for using a product like the U140. If you're facing those OSHA regulations or those EPA regulations requiring a clean and safe area to work. So the best applications, or the most suitable applications for U140, in my opinion, are concrete floors, smooth concrete, trowel finished, machine finished, polished concrete as well. Those floors that you want to put a highly oil and stain resistant barrier on the floor. Okay. Interior, most of those floors you'll find interior in a workshop, in a factory, in a garage floor, in an auto body shop. Yeah, these are the majority of the applications for the U140. Where you don't want to, maybe you've got some very large square footage and it's not cost effective to put in an expensive epoxy down, something that may lift and peel, something that requires extensive surface prep. The U140 requires minimal prep. The floor has to be clean, it has to be absorbent. As long as those two conditions, you can put down the U140. It's got high coverage, typically 800 square feet per gallon, and with two coats you get a very oil and stain resistant coating, what I call bang for the buck. We're holding up against diesel, cutting oil, motor oil, gasoline, hydraulic fluids, even jet fuel. We have great resistance. So think about those types of workshop environments, those types of stains and solutions, and the U140 will resist significantly against those. You can also use it outside, parking decks, loading docks, driveways, access ways, ramps. Again, if the concrete is smooth or a dense concrete, that's really the best fit. If it's rough or broom finish, I'd probably be pointing you more towards our penetrating sealer, something like our PEN 55, which has oil and stain resistant, but works better in those highly textured environments. But certainly the U140 is UV resistant. It will hold up outside. You can use it on overlays outside. You can use it on decorative concrete. You can use it on stamped concrete. So the CoverShield U140 is a two-part urethane. So it chemically reacts and provides this dense interlocked sealer across the floor. So it's much more chemical resistant than a standard epoxy or urethane or acrylic sealer. It also has a thin coat. It soaks into the surface and leaves a thin film on the surface that is highly oil and chemical resistant. Because it's thin, it doesn't lift and peel like an epoxy would or a standard coating. It's so close to the surface that it just doesn't scrape off. It doesn't have what I would call like a sheet failure. If it's scratched locally, you can repair that and start reapply another coat. So high chemical resistance, doesn't lift and peel. And then thirdly, the surface prep. It doesn't require extensive surface prep. You can go over a smooth surface. You don't have to grind it. As long as that surface is absorbent and will pass what we call a water test, then you can use it. So ease of application, minimal surface prep, highly chemical and oil resistant, and it doesn't lift and peel. That's what I would say are the main advantages over typical products or competing products that you might get in a box store or a competitor outlet. So when you're sealing a concrete slab, you want to avoid obviously something lifting and peeling. And that is the problem with epoxy products. In order to have a long-lasting epoxy, you need to do extensive surface prep. You need to apply it fairly thick, 30 mils or above, in order to get a durable seal or a durable coating. If you don't do that, it will chip, it will lift and peel, and you'll have extensive failure and having to redo that coating in a short period of time. The U140, again, requires the surface to be clean. It requires it to be porous. So if water will soak into it, then so will the U140. So much less preparation is required. It has to be clean, of course, but as long as the surface is porous, you can use it. And the coverage is a lot higher. The If you've got a coating that's only doing 200 or 300 square feet per gallon, that's going to lift your cost. Whereas the U140 is typically around 800 square feet per gallon. So tremendous coverage over the surface. And then the other thing is being able to repair. From time to time you are going to get scratches, you are going to get scrapes, and in order to repair the U140, it's a matter of scrubbing the surface and reapplying. It bonds very well to itself. You get into other products, you're going to be either grinding off or extensive sanding or stripping the floor. So all those can be avoided if you're using something like the U140. It's a very, what we call, sustainable coating. It bonds very well to itself. It is easy to recoat. So the steps for applying the U140. So the concrete needs to be clean. It needs to be absorbent in order to apply the product. So if we're on a new concrete, it may require some densification. You can use a densifier, something like our CD80. It's a good densifier to use prior to sealing it. That'll give you an even harder surface to bond to and increase the physical properties of the concrete and the sealer. But once the floor has been densified, or it's been cleaned and densified, then you can apply the U140. It's best put down with a flat mop microfiber, typically around 800 square feet per gallon, so you get good coverage. We use the term thin to win. It's all about thin coats. So 2 thin coats is the minimum requirement, 800 square feet, put down with a flat mop microfiber. You can spray it down and then spread it thin. You can pour it and then spread it down with again a flat mop or even a roller. If you're doing large areas, I would recommend using a 3/8 nap roller and something like an 18-inch wide roller, so you get better production. Each coat takes about 3 hours to dry. I mean, it depends on the temperature of the slab, but if you're in the mid-70s, it's typically about 3 hours. The product's ready to use, so you don't dilute it. You just mix the 2 parts together and then spread it out. Wait 3 hours for the first coat, and then you can apply the second coat. If you can come back and apply the second coat the next day, actually up to 48 hours. So it has what we call a long recoat window. As long as the surface is clean, you can come back and reapply. It bonds very well to itself. Things to watch out for: if it's low temperature, everything takes longer. Once you're below 70 degrees, it's going to push that drying time out, maybe double. Could be 6 hours, could be 12 hours before the first coat dries. It's important to make sure the first coat is good and dry before you apply the second coat. So easy application. Just make sure that the product is applied thin and that you give time for each coat to dry. So the U140 has a 12-month shelf life. That's important. It's a 2-part material. It has an A side, and a B side is what we call the catalyst. That catalyst is sensitive to moisture, so if moisture gets into the container, it will react with the B side and start to thicken it up, start to generate little bubbles, and lower the viscosity, or if you like, increase the thickness of the material. So after about 12 months, you might see that happen, especially if moisture does get in, if it's not stored correctly. So that's why we put a limitation of around 12 months, so that you don't have those increased thickness, outgassing. All of those things will affect the final appearance and function of the cured film. You might see pinholes through the bubbles coming out. You won't get the same coverage as you normally would. and the product won't have the same physical characteristics that we expect and what we maintain in our data sheet. Does the U140 interact poorly with other products or other product types? That's a question that can have some detailed answers. Let me try and summarize it. First of all, the U140 is designed to go on a porous surface. Okay, so porous concrete, porous overlay, either inside the property or outside the property. So if there is an existing coating on there, an epoxy or a urethane, that is not a good application for the U140. The only real product that I would recommend or have some benefit in using prior to sealing with the U140 is a concrete densifier. Something like our CD80 densifier, which is highly reactive. It'll soak into the concrete, densify it, harden it, act as a moisture blocker, and give a very good surface for which the U140 to come off with. Okay, so don't use the product as a top coat to an existing cedar or coating.